Hello and welcome. Thank you for popping into my channel. If you are new here, please like and subscribe for me. If you find this content helpful, then smash that notification bell so that you don't miss out in the next video. Comment below with anything that you need help with or topics you'd like me to cover, and check out my website, consultingninja.tech. With that out of the way, we are going to do a complex registration form with TypeScript and actions. I've had a few requests for this kind of video. People are wanting more complicated, complex stuff, and so that's what we're going to do. This will be a little bit of a longer video, so stick with me. I hope that you find this helpful. Let's get to it. We have a home page and a sign up page. Once we have some users, they'll show up here in a list. But for now, we just have a home and a sign up, and there's nothing in the sign up, the registration page. That's what we're going to make together right now. Inside of my project structure, I have an empty folder that just says sign up. And so roll up your sleeves. Let's get to it. We first need to create, let's make the markup first. So we need a plus page.svelte. And in here, this is going to involve TypeScript. I'm going to show you I have a type mapper. I've done a short video on type guards and type mappers in a different video. I've done that in the past. I am making use of that in this video. And what a type map is, it takes one type and converts it to another. If you've never used those before, in most projects, those are used heavily, at least have been used heavily in the projects I've been involved with, to make sure that the type that you're looking for is in fact what you're working with. We are going to be making use of enhance on our form. Again, this will be using form actions. We're not doing any homebrew stuff here for the most part. We are going to be making use of SvelteKit functionality, so we're going to be using form actions. And part of that is going to be making use of the enhance. I don't like using a full page reload if I don't have to. We're also going to be making use of the form itself. We'll export let form. And we're going to be using that for several things, and we'll get to that as we create the markup for this. And then the next thing that we need to do is, I always, when I'm working with SvelteKit and Svelte, I love this piece of functionality, and that's the Svelte bindings. I always bind my forms to a variable. It just makes working with them so much easier in case you need to. So I just do that as a matter of course. And this is going to be an HTML form element, just like that. Now let's get to the markup. Let's just make an H2, and I'm putting this in there, and I'll make this code available in my repository. I'm just going to put a little comment in here. Add website logo here. I feel like if you're filling out a registration form, this is a good place to shamelessly plug your website and add a little bit more marketing here. So if you're making a registration form, this is a good place to go ahead and insert a logo. And so I'm going to put you up on that and insert that placeholder for you here. So if you decide to use this code in your own project, you'll have that available. And then we're going to create our form. Now, we're going to need a few things inside of here, but before we get to that, let's bind this right away. Bind this to that variable that we created, and that's this form. We're also going to put our use enhance. And you'll notice I'm actually only using the default functionality here. I don't have anything else going on in there, and I'm not going to add anything else in there. I am going to put a method on here of post, and the action that we're going to be running is the !/signup action. Now we're going to create some form items. They're going to be wrapped in divs to make the styling a little bit better. Let's add a class on here, and I'm going to copy and paste the style code because this is already going to be a bit of a longer video, as I said. So I'll save a little bit of time by copy and pasting that, but it will be available in the repository as well for you guys. So here we need a label, and this is going to be for first name. And then I also like to make my users aware of what is required. And I do that by adding in just a little asterisk in the top right hand corner. And to do that, using just markup, I go like this. Put an asterisk inside of a small tag, inside of a sub tag, and that's going to put it in the top right hand corner of your label. And we'll have just a tiny bit of styling to color that red and just let everybody know, hey, this is a required field. And the input also obviously will have the required Boolean attribute set on there, and so it will be required that way as well. What I'm doing here, I'm not going to be nitpicking the value of this form, but what I am going to do is if a user's submission fails, then we're going to check to see if that's the case. And if it's the case, then we're going to put that value back. What's more annoying than when you're filling out a form, you do something incorrectly and they clear the entire form out? We're not going to do that to our users, and so we're not going to do that here. So let's go ahead and put that form question mark dot first name. If it's there, use it. If not, then just leave it blank and let the user fill it in. And we'll fill that part in when we do the plus page.server, that file that goes along with the markup here. The ID here is going to be first name. The type will be text. The name will be first name. And I like to use camel case. You guys let me know below if you like camel case or if there's some other convention that you stick with. Let me know below. And now we can actually copy and paste this. And what we're going to have is we're going to have a first name, a last name, an email, a password, and we're also going to let our users choose a URL. And that part of the video, we'll leave that for another video. It's just part of a project that I'm putting together for you guys. As I said at the beginning, I've gotten a lot of requests for more complicated stuff, and so that's what I'm going to be focusing on for you. I hope that you find this all helpful. This is all going to be really good stuff. Registration forms, we're going to do authentication, and this is part of a photograph app, a photography app, that's going to let users choose their own URL. They'll also be able to style their page however they want. If they're logged in, they can make those decisions. If they're not logged in, then they just see the page as any other random person visiting. And the point of the application is to allow people to register for the application, and they can upload their photos and make their photography work available for people to check out. And that's what this is going to be when we're all done with it. But for now, we are working on the registration form. So here, let's fill in all of these details. We're going to have first name, last name. We're going to have an email. The email address is going to be the username. I'm not going to make them choose a username. We're just going to be using an email because that is going to be a unique value. And then we're also going to let them have a URL, as I said, and that value will also have to be unique. Everything in our registration form is required. I am of the mindset that we should only be asking for required fields. That's another thing that I think is super irritating when you go to fill out something and they have unrequired fields. If it's not required, why are you asking for it? That is just the way I feel. The one thing here, when we get to this password, this is going to be for password. But the one thing here, we are not going to be sending the password back. If the password does not meet requirements, then we just leave that. We send it back, but we don't send back the password. We don't want to do that because we don't want anybody to get a hold of that. All right, so this is going to be password. This will be password. Oh, and we need to change the type on our email. That is not text. That's going to be an email type. We want our browser to enforce this stuff for us. That just makes things easier. Like that. We are going to add a class on this one. Here, let's get rid of this and let's put class like that. And it's going to be a field error. And we are going to do our own error checking in our forms. So we'll come back to what this is, but essentially what this is going to be a class that says whether or not, so if they try to submit a weak password, then we're going to kick this back And then this class is going to highlight this field for us. And we're actually going to want, let's copy and paste this and put it on our email field as well, except for this is going to be email used. We're going to be checking, we have to check to make sure that the email is still available. If somebody has already registered using an email address, we can't obviously let someone else use that email address. Alright, one more field to go, and it's going to be the URL. And we're going to call this user URL. This will say choose a URL. This also will get kicked back if the URL is taken. So we have URL taken. The ID will need to be user URL. The name, the same, user URL. And this will be a required field as well. We want to put, the URL is something that we want to put. So put value. And this is going to be form question mark dot URL, otherwise empty string. Alright, now just on the very bottom here, we're going to add two other things inside. Before we leave the form, let's go ahead and add another div. This is also going to have this form item class. And we're going to put a little conditional in here. If form.error, if there is an error in our form, then we're going to display a message that we send back. And let's put this in a small tag, and it's just going to be form.message. And the last thing that we need, we can copy this, save us a little typing. We're going to need a button, a type of submit. Let's just do sign up. Alright, and then I'm going to just copy and paste. There's not a ton of styles, but I do want to save just that little bit of time, so I'm going to copy and paste those. Let's save that and go check our work. And here we have our form. I do have that placeholder for you guys here. So again, if you're doing a registration form, this is a great place to plug your website. So add your logo in here. Good spot for that. Here is those required asterisks I was telling you about. We do those with the sup tag wrapped inside of a small, and then the asterisks inside of there, and then we're just making them red with styles and adding a little bit of padding in between. That's what the style is doing there. I have a little bit of a fade on the sign up button, but as of right now, there is nothing going to happen when we hit that button. Now we still have quite a bit of work to do, so let's get back to it. Inside of our sign up directory, now we need to create a plus page.server.ts, and there's going to be quite a bit of magic going on here. Plus page.server.ts. Now, the first thing that we need to do is we need to import all of our types. So import type, and we need actions. We need the request event. We need action failure. We need redirect. All of those are coming from @SvelteJS/kit. And then we also need to import fail and redirect the actual functions here from @SvelteJS/kit. Whoops. /kit as well. We are going to import a type I made called register form data. Whoops, and this needs to say type. And we can take a peek at that. This is the interface that I created for the register form. Just has, these are those things that we're going to pass back If the password is weak, that's going to be a Boolean value. If it's taken, if the URL is taken, if the email has already been used, if there's another error, and then the items that we're sending back in case we need to. Alright, and then I have a back-end utils file that has pretty much a bunch of database utilities. So we're going to be making use of those here. We're going to need a return URLs list, a register user function. I have this mapper register form to user without ID, and a return emails list. Now we can go take a peek at these. This is my backend utils function, and this is basically a bunch of functions for interacting with the database, but it also has a couple of things that I might split out later, such as this function looks to see if we're on a user styled page. As I said, the user, when they're logged in, will be able to choose a whole bunch of options to style their page, and then anybody visiting their URL will see those changes, but those changes will only exist on their URL and not the rest of the application. This function just tells us if they are on a user styled page or not. This is that mapper I was referring to that's going to convert our register form to a user without an ID. And we'll be making use of that in our register function here. We also want to import check password from // password check. This is a homebrew function that I wrote that checks for the password strength. And when I say checks for password strength, it's kind of the standard checks. So let's go take a look at that. When I say standard checks, I mean the length has to be at least 8 characters long. It needs to contain at least one uppercase, at least one lowercase. It needs to contain at least 3 either special characters or number. Nothing super specific. I'm not checking to see if it's been used recently or if it's contains the company name or anything like that, but just the general stuff. And we're going to make use of that as well. Because we want to kick it back if it does not meet requirements, right? And then I have a database connection file that just fires up the database so that you don't have to have, it just kind of removes some of that boilerplate from our file here. Now let's get to the actual work here. And what we're going to do is we're going to export const actions. This is going to be of type actions that we imported there. And this is an object that contains our actions. The action that we're going to have here is really only one, since we're doing the register page. There's going to be one action. It's the sign up action. That's what we called it in our markup. The action here is !/signup. And so that's what we need to make it called here. And that's going to be an async function that takes the request, and that is of type request event, and it's going to return a promise that is going to be a register form data or an action failure with a register form data, or a redirect. Alright, fat arrow function. There's a lot going on there, so I just wanted to make sure we had everything. And now it's going to yell at me saying, hey, you have to return what you said you were going to return, which is either that register form data itself or an action failure which contains the register form data, or we're going to redirect them. So here, now let's go ahead and pull out all of our information from our form. So const sign up form data. Let's be specific as to what we're doing here. We're going to await request dot form data, and this is I love Svelte for this. It's so easy to get our data out here. And we're going to need our URL choice. And this is going to be that sign up form data.get user URL. If there's nothing there, then let's just put the empty string. And now we're going to need one for first name, last name, email, and password. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this. First name, last name, email, password. And we can just copy, paste. Copy, paste, email, copy, paste, password, copy, paste. Now let's initialize an object that we're going to return. So let SignUpResponse. Again, let's be very specific as to what it is we're working with here. And this is going to be of type register form data. So here we're going to need, you guessed it, an email used. That'll be false. Weak password, false. Error, false. Success. And I'm not sure if I'm going to use that or not. I typically have that in my APIs. I'm not sure if I'm really going to make use of that here. URL taken, false, a message that will be displayed if we're sending that form back, and then we need our first name, last name, all of those form items. If we need to send this back, we'll be able to make use of those. Just like that. So now we can get to the actual checking. And what's the first thing that we need to do? Well, let's just go ahead and check. Very first thing, let's check the password. So let's say const is pass or password strong. And we're going to run that check password function that I showed you earlier. And we're going to pass it password.toString. Make sure it's a string. And then if not is password strong, then we're going to do a few things here. We're going to set in the sign up response the weak password to true. We are going to set the sign up response.error to true. We are going to set the signup response.message to password does not meet requirements. And then what we're going to do is we're going to return fail with a status of 400 and then send back the signup response. So we've set everything that we need to set. We'll be able to make use of that stuff in our markup. We're checking all of these things: email, password, URL, and then we'll send it back one at a time. So here we've done the password. If the password is weak, we kick it back. Now let's just keep going because we have still a few things to check here. Let's go ahead and start let URL list, and this is a string array. Let's initialize that to an empty array. Let's fire up. Now we need to start contacting the server. So my database connection file, the very first thing it does is connects and returns the collection so that we can make use of that all over the place, because when you're working with MongoDB, that's really what you need, is the collection that you're wanting to work with. There are times where you would want to return something else. So if I had multiple collections in this application, I would need to split that out. But since I'm just working with one, then I can do it like this. My database connection file just returns the collection that I need to modify or get the information out of. Now let's go ahead and do a try. And what we're going to do here is URL list equals await, return URLs list, passing that collection. What the return URLs list does is it goes to the database and just pulls out all of the URLs. And when I say the URLs, what I mean is this application, if you don't remember, it lets a user choose their own URL so that when people come to look at their photographs, it's the URL that they want. What this does is goes to the database and pulls out all the URLs and returns them, because a new user that is registering needs to give a unique URL. So if there's any issues with that, we're going to catch the error. And we can just make this an any type. Really, it would be a Mongo database error at this point. And then we'll set that SignUpResponse.error equal to true. SignUpResponse.message is going to be either any message that Mongo returns or our own, and we're going to say error connecting to database. And if that's the case, then we're going to go ahead and return a fail and pass back that response. Alright, so if the connection to the database was good, that means that we have a list of URLs to check. So that's what we should do next. So if URL list dot includes the urlChoice dot toString, just in case something weird is passed in, make sure to change it to a string, because that's what includes is expecting. So if that URL has already been taken, then we need to, you guessed it, set the appropriate response in our SignUpResponse object. So error will be true, and the message will be URL already in use. And we also want to set the URL taken to true as well. And then we'll return again that fail with our response. So you see a pattern here. We have our response object. We have all the things that we need to do with that response object, and we just check those things one after another, and then we send back the response when we know the answer to the question. The next thing that we need to check is the email list. So the email list, again, that's going to be essentially the username. It has to be unique. It can't already have been used. So we need to check to make sure that the email that they're trying to use or trying to register with has not already been used. So we can return the emails list, and again, that's just a function that's expecting that collection, and it's just going to go in the database and pull out all of the emails that have been used. And we can say if email list dot includes. And so if the email has already been used, then we want to again set that response error to true. Set the email used to true. Set the response, the message, I should say, to something that makes sense. This email address has already been used. I hope that you guys are having fun with this. I certainly have had fun putting this together, and I'm having a blast putting together the rest of this application. I'm currently working on the authentication portion. I like to work things from scratch. If you if you haven't figured that out by now, this is really straightforward stuff. It's not super complicated. You set your criteria of what needs to happen, and then you just check those items. It's more important to understand what your application is doing, especially if you're writing this for yourself or a client. You want to understand what's going on. You want other people to understand what's going on, because if someone else needs to come in here and work on this, it should be easy to understand. And that's one of the big drawbacks of adding packages, is that it's obfuscating what's happening underneath the hood. When you write things yourself, it's very plain to see, and that's the way it should be. So let's keep going here. That's my little rant. I do like to make things from scratch because it's usually faster, it's usually less buggy in my own personal experience, and it's a lot easier to understand what is happening. So if there was some other weird error, we want to do this. Whoops, this should be in here. Maybe the database was not able to be reached for this one. And then again, we'll return that fail. And actually, this should be a 500 because this would be a server error. That should be a 500 code, not a 400. A 400 would be the client sent something inappropriate. What we're going to do is, if the email checks out, if the password checks out, if the URL that the user wants checks out, all of that stuff is good, well, then they get to, you guessed it, register. And it's funny, this is actually the shortest portion of code that we're going to do here inside this register file, and that's just going to be const user to insert await, and here we're going to use that giant function name. This is taking the register form and converting it to a user without an ID. I'm not handling the IDs in my application. I'm letting Mongo do that because it just makes sense. There's no need to do it yourself when Mongo will do it for you, and probably do it better. The driver will set the ID for you if you don't do it yourself. And so I just feel like it's probably better to do it that way. And then what we're going to pass in here is that SignUpResponse, because at this point, if everything else has gone well, what this is going to contain is the information passed from the form. And this function is going to take that. Let's go just take a peek again at that. It's going to take that register form data, and it's going to convert it into a user without ID. And so the very first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to hash that password, because you don't want to be storing the plain text password. We do that using the bcrypt library. Super simple. You just have await bcrypt.hash, the password that you're going to hash, and then this is basically what salt level you want. Most people use like a 10. I go with a 12, although in the end, I guess there's not much of a difference. And then here we're just having, this is where the user is created, and then it returns the user without an ID. So once we have that user, then we're going to get the result of insert, and we're going to await again register user, and we pass in the collection and the user to insert. So again, pretty straightforward. We are creating a user with the form data. We're going to have a result of that insert here in just a second. Again, if you've noticed, I have that database connection file that returned that collection because we use it all over the place. There's so many things that you're doing with those collections when you're working with MongoDB. It makes sense to have that in a variable, and then you can just use it over and over and over again. Now the last thing that we need to do is make sure that the result of insert.acknowledged, if this is not true, then nothing else matters. When you're working with MongoDB, if acknowledged is not true, then there will not be an inserted ID. There won't be anything else to check, and so you could just bail out at that point. But so you want to check that first. But if that is there and the result of insert.inserted ID is also there, then we are going to redirect to a new page. And the URL that we use here, it's going to be a string literal. So backticks, it's going to be /$ brackets user to insert dot URL. So once they've chosen a URL and we've confirmed that that URL does not exist, and after they register, then we're going to push them to the newly created page that is their page. If anything went wrong there, that would mean that we need to set our SignUpResponse.error to true, our SignUpResponse.message equal to error registering user, and then we would need to again return a fail, and this would be a 503 error, and then we'll pass back that sign-up response. And there we have it. Let's go play around with this. So let's add a John Costa. I don't have the rest of this done, so once we register here, once we redirect, we won't have a page, so we're going to hit a 404 not found. But let's play around with the error checking. So let's do J Costa. You can see I've already been playing around with this. Let's go ahead and enter in just 3 characters, and oh, we forgot to change the type in our URL. This should not be typed password, this should be typed text. And again, we'll just use 4 characters, 3 characters, something we know is going to fail, and then our URL. And there you can see we sent that request to the back end. The password is too weak, and so our markup is triggering the red outline, and then here's the message that we chose in the back to send, saying, hey, that password does not meet requirements. So let's go ahead and choose a strong password. Has to be at least 8 characters, has to also contain at least 3 special and or numbers. So go ahead and enter in an uppercase and a lowercase, don't forget those. So add something in there to make this work. And now this is exactly what I expected, because we don't have the page to receive, but the registration was successful. We can see that by going to our home page, and now in our user list there is our J Costa. So pretty cool. If we were to go add in another John Costa and use that email address again, and let's go ahead and enter in a password, and doesn't really matter, try to sign up, then you can see there we get the red box around our email. It's like, hey, this email has already been used. You cannot do that. Pretty cool. And the same thing would happen in the URL, since all of our users have to have a unique URL. Then that check would trigger the same error messaging there as well. So there we have a pretty sweet registration form with lots of error checking and lots of cool markup to display those error messages. I hope that you found this video helpful. Stay tuned for more, because I actually have a lot more of this done. I don't have it all here since I knew this was already going to be a longer video. I hope you've enjoyed this. I will have this code available, and I'll continue to release videos on this project that we're putting together here. This will be super sweet. I hope you've enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more, and as always, have a great day.